Yeah, I am here, you, man. Okay, no problem. Can I start the session, man?
Can you
Can
hear
I
me,
start the
Manish?
session, man? Yeah,
I
you are
can't
audible,
hear
ma'am.
you.
You are audible. Yeah. Okay. But I am audible. You are audible.
I can't hear you.
Okay. अंकित देखो क्या प्रॉब्लम है.
No.
Ma'am, अच्छा ma'am, you have some issue in the mic maybe because you are audible and we are not audible. इनको कॉल करूं. अच्छा तो 2 मिनट रुक जाओ लाइव से.
Ravi, the Manish's voice is not coming. Manish, I can't hear you.
But I am hearing you. You are audible. Maybe some issue in the mic.
That's because you
No, I've done. Can't hear his voice.
should.
मैम आपको मैं
Manish,
सुन ले रहा हूँ.
yes, my volume was low. My
Oh, no
volume was.
problem then.
Yeah.
It's okay, yeah? No
Okay.
problem, no
Yes.
problem.
Perfect.
Ankit,
Perfect.
we are live, Ankit? Okay. Welcome everyone and special welcome to Dr. Ajanta Sen ma'am from Industrial Design Center, Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay, Mumbai and Nanyang University at Singapore. As you all are aware that this is a 3-month part-time certificate course, Fundamental of Social Design under the Spark project of Ministry of Education, Government of India. Myself, Manish Arora, a principal investigator and faculty member, Department of Applied Art, Faculty of Visual Art, Banaras Hindu University. And this course is running in association with Maryland Institute College of Art, Department of Social Design, MICA, Baltimore, and Michigan State University, Michigan. Now I am welcoming all of you, and today's session is related with the design and technology. So then today's session topic is technology and social design under the part 2, and ma'am will cover the human propensity to build technologies and the ones facilitating social design. Now I'm welcoming ma'am and request to him, please start your session.
Thank you, Manish. Thank you for that nice welcome. Uh, good afternoon, participants. We're going to start the second part of the three-part um, series on technology and social design. Uh, I hadn't anticipated the series to actually encapsulate such a lot of very relevant material for social design. Technologies, different dynamics vis-a-vis social design, and I have not been able to accommodate a lot of things that I've been wanting to, and I've been constantly taking them off. But anyway, today I will start with the with the framework that I had offered at the beginning of last presentation, which was this framework that has been conceived of by Steven Pinker of MIT, linguist, philosopher, scientist there. And I have borrowed the framework, although he uses it in another context. But I have actually been inspired by the way he manages to split everyday life into three distinct properties, one being entropy, one being information, one being evolution. I mentioned last time that entropy is when disorder sets in, whether in the world, in the world of chemistry, physics, chemical world, physical world. For example, if there is a petroleum leakage from a tanker into the ocean, you can consider that to be a form of entropy, where the ecological cycle in and around there and for vast miles around it will get completely disrupted. And then the high level strategy will be to invoke the organizing principles of information, which means what are the technologies, what are the techniques, what are the ways that we can contain the the spill, and in what way can we try and damage control the number of species that are going to die, which is very, very unfortunate, and how quickly can we uh, arrest the entropy and bring the ecological cycle back into its normal working. So, therefore, the idea of entropy is very useful because it applies to the physical world and applies equally to the human world. I explained what that is last time. But we move on from there, we moved on to uh, uh, looking at information as the organizing principle for setting things right. And in that, I talked about two properties of information, namely atoms versus bits, which means that you have technologies that reside in the non-computing zone. Uh, they could be very high-tech technologies. Most of these technologies are actually in the manufacturing sector, but they have an analog linear structure, and they move in waves. Actually, they don't disrupt themselves every so many units. They go in waves. They're pretty organic that way, and uh, they are not digital. The other one, of course, is bits, which forms the digital structure of technology, where it forms bits and bytes, ones and zeros, which is called discrete structure, which means it keeps breaking after every 1 0 1 0. It is nonlinear. It is interactive, and so we have these two forms. And from there, I moved on to a very, very critical understanding of technology, which is absolutely critical and all encompassing, because once we understand that, then we know uh, what technologies came about since the beginning of humankind, what technologies stayed, and the ones that stayed, in what way have they become completely integrated into our own lives, where if we are not careful, we could actually destroy some of those technologies, some of those medias, thinking they're not important. But we know now that when we start with the oral medias, uh, right at the beginning of humankind's history, we know now that the computing platform is trying to bring back orality, and it's finding it really difficult. Something that human beings do so easily. We speak, we sing, we laugh, we play act. We crack jokes, but it is so difficult to make the computer do all that, and therefore we should learn to cherish all the different technologies that have come to us over the millennia, where each one has its own role to play in different environments of everyday life. So, in the first instance, I take you through the evolution of technologies and medias in a very, very quick rundown, where and this will help you remain factored in. So we have the pre-information age, which was 500,000 to 150,000 years ago, where the articulation of inner thoughts, it's not inner, it's inner thoughts as external information happened without any uniform codifying system. It was basically through miming, person to person, that's it. And therefore you can imagine how limited that kind of information structure was. The next one was the first information age between 150 to 70,000 years ago. It has been termed the cognitive revolution, because that's when most of mankind's inventions actually took place. The articulation of inner thoughts into an outward set of outward set of expressions have by now been able to form a set of protocols as like a uniform language system. So the media there is of course language, and the technology there is actually speech. Please read technology instead of gesture. So the first one was miming, the second one was speech. The third one that is the second information age, which was like 15,000 years ago. Experts differ on the dates, but carbon dating has actually pushed it back. Earlier it was 5,000 years, then it became 10,000, now it's become 15 to 25,000 years ago. When agricultural revolution happened, it happened uh, because humankind was able to organize information around reproducing it and archiving it through writing, through the invention of writing. And part of that was also they say that writing actually was invented to facilitate counting. So, because trade was one of the first things they did when they settled down. The technology there was script. The third information age was the scientific industrial revolution 500 years ago. It Information was craving to be reproduced on a mass scale, which is what happened through printing, through hot press technology. And the last, most recent information age is the fourth information age, where we have learned now to, because of its non-linear interactive medium, we have learned to retrieve information. We've also learned to search through information, because when you can retrieve, you can also search. This run through is important, because when I come to the next one and I come to evolution, which is Evo, uh, the the simpler evolution here is where we try to understand how the word technology came in. It is a Greek word, technologia, in short, techne, which came in during the Greek period, continued into 15th century, when Leonardo da Vinci was able to actually fuse science and art to form his notion of a technology, which was a very fine notion of technology. And then it moved on to the 17th and 19th century, when technology got completely dissociated from any subject of humanities, arts, letters. It became completely cognitive, mechanistic, and no wonder it's called the machine age. Technology became synonymous with the machine alone and went far away from any connection with the human being. Uh, Now, at this point in time, I have to go back into history, where I've quoted the Homo habilis from the pre-Homo sapien species, because habilis means skillful human, and we know that uh, the human had already started building tools and had some sign of language, as an invention. And then we come to the last old the most the oldest connection that we have, where I will show you through a very, very important person's understanding of technology, where he's able to connect technology to the way the earliest species actually interacted with their environments. I've talked about it. So these are the earliest species which actually had sensories. Basically, sensories are information that come from the brain. That is where you have mammals and they have brains. So the information comes from brain, and through sensories get and through sensories and neuron systems, the nerve system goes into muscles and then gets articulated as gesture. Now there is a sensory gesture technology connection, which is what I'm going to be talking about now. So our uh, so this is the basic framework, and we now move on to the next, um, which is where this constant understanding of technology, this constant, rewinding of our biological past, there's a good reason for it, because increasingly neuroscientists, biologists, evolutionary biologists, computer scientists, psychologists, cultural historians, and behavioral scientists, that is, those studying social behavior, are getting more and more interested in trying to understand uh, how humans behave and how actually they build technologies, and does their social behavior actually produce technology that has implications, positive implications for social design, because that's what we are interested in. So neuroscience studies have shown that sensories, like I said, sensories receive messages from brain, pass them through the nervous system, and activate these messages as gestures, various kinds, an enormous number of gestures. And there are evolutionary biologists who've also studied, who are also computer scientists, who try to understand. Increasingly now, they're trying to understand gestures, so that the interactivity in the computer medium is able to capture, reasonably capture, the kind of gestures that human beings actually perform, not what the computer is able to do, which is very, very limited. The computer doesn't have any gestures. The few gestures that the computer has now has come through research that was done at Xerox PARC, which I will talk about tomorrow. Xerox PARC in California, and where they tried to actually use natural language systems of humans, and uh, you know, study of gestures, so that they can bring in, appropriate gesture technology. So I come now to the thinker who was able to actually integrate, who actually gave a fresh take on technology, that made technology uh, resonate with social spaces and social design. This is Marshall McLuhan, who's one of the seminal, he's called a media guru. He's a Canadian. He was a Canadian. Uh, he was teaching and working in Toronto in the 50s, in the 40s, in the 50s, in the 60s. And he was surrounded by a group of students and colleagues who did so much work in trying to understand various facets of media as connected to technology, that they came to be known as the Toronto School of Communication, a very, very influential group. And I just want to mention here that, the head of this very, very important school for interactivity, called the ITP at the Tisch School of Design at New York University, was headed by someone called Red Burns, who was a student of Marshall McLuhan. We worked with Red through Microsoft, and Red, who's now passed away in her at a ripe age of 80, about at least about 6, 7 years ago. Red, as a student of McLuhan, came down from Canada straight to New York, and she was one of the first persons in the early 70s, when the when television had just been introduced. She was in Because she was McLuhan's student, she was able to actually envisage the television not simply as an idiot box that you sit and watch programs. She was able to figure that, since there is her area of study at that point in time was elderly treatment and elderly therapy in hospitals and care homes. And she said, care homes have television sets. If I can use a television set to actually, package other forms of messages which can reach to them in the friendly manner in which television reaches all other information, then they will not be able to distinguish between the medical information they're getting, which is important for them, the therapeutic information, and all the soap operas, etc., that they're watching. So effectively, she was able to figure out a local area network kind of a structure, and bring in all this information through a television set, which was rather linear, non interactive, and eventually came to be called the Idiot Box. So I cite Red Burns and our personal interaction with Red Burns. I mean, we have looked up to Red Burns, and she has always appreciated the work that we presented at Microsoft. And so I understand in some sense Red Burns' thinking, which is very, very social, even though she was in New York. And she was able to actually identify with, when for the first time mobile technology, in the 90s, was able to was leveraged to send messages to fisher folks, uh, on the coastline of Kerala where they would go out to catch fish, and the mobile telephony system on the coast would tell them, don't bring back much fish today, there isn't much demand, you will lose your, it will be unnecessarily wasted because your price will fall, just bring less supply because there is less demand. And for the 90s, that was really path breaking, something that they were doing, Redburns was doing for the Eskimos in the 70s, but Redburns was very appreciative of the fact that the Redburns kind of system was actually being applied in Kerala, and we've had discussions about these, etc., etc. So now I move on. The important thing about McLuhan that I would like to say here as an opening a point is that McLuhan was standing at the crossroads of various crossroads of an explosion of visual technology. So a little before McLuhan was photography, and soon after that was cinema as moving image, which was without sound and black and white. Uh, and then soon after that, it became color. Roughly around that time was introduced television was introduced soon after, and then video in that order. So all of this, the seminal impact of photography, cinema, television, video, all of these being the domain of the visual, had and of course there was a telephone. So all of these technologies actually managed to sit in social sphere right from day one. They never went into the personal domains of the rich. So this obviously then engaged the attention of those like McLuhan, who were interested in understanding how technology behaves in social spaces amongst common people. The way he did it was to look at technology not as some R&D going on in a lab. The way he looked at it was to make a direct connection between technology and the human body, and he did that by first looking at what we have already been exploring, which is how humans are already endowed with sensories, and the sensories have an ability to pass on information. So when you pass on information and you have a, a container, a medium in which to capture the information, that becomes the medium. And the facilitating technology supporting the medium would then be the technology to actually run the media. So the connection, so he saw media as an extension of sensory, and he saw technology as an extension of media, which was never before seen or understood in those lights, in that light, because it becomes very simple for people to understand these technologies and say, okay, I get it. This is the media I'm using, which is telephone. My What is the connection between telephone as a media with sensory? Telephone as a media with sensory offers the sensory of ear, because you're hearing, and the sensory of sound. Which are both connected to oral sensory. And when you take the telephone in your hand, I'm talking about the original telephone, you put it in your ear, the there is a very obvious intuitive connection. Nobody has to tell anybody how to hold a telephone, because there are two mouthpiece. There are two pieces. One is a earpiece and mouthpiece, suggestive of how it should be done, and that suggestion that you can look at and understand that this is how I need to use it is called affordance. So there was a very natural affordance. So first of all, there's a very natural extension of sensory to the act of hearing and speaking. And the technology, which was the switching system that was embedded inside the telephone, never bothered the user of the telephone. It was deep inside, nobody cared. Even if the baby, you're speaking on the telephone and your baby comes and drags the telephone and drops it on the floor, nothing really happens. The mother just picks up the telephone and continues to talk. Nobody worries about whether whether there is this technology inside or that technology inside. And I say this as a critique of the mobile phone, which is so primitive because, first of all, there is no affordance to the mobile phone. It's a little rectangular thing. You don't know where to speak from. Okay, you don't know where to put it. You don't know where the voice is going to come out from. You don't know whether the person is actually listening to you, because a square or a rectangular thing is not suggestive of how the shape of a mouth is, how the shape of a ear is, how we hold. Because when you hold a mobile phone, you're always worried it might drop. And because the technology is such, and because of inbuilt obsolescence, a mobile phone drops is the end of the life cycle of the mobile phone. You had no such worries with the domain of the telephone. There was a direct connection between sensory to media to technology, and the affordance in between, the gesture being the gesture that you hold, and the other gesture being the gesticulation of, speaking when you're talking to somebody, and then you also sometimes doodle, etc., on the side. So I will come to that. I'll show you a chart of that. But the two things that McLuhan was able to so the connection that he basically made was sensory as inherited from earlier species onwards, and sensories carrying messages from brain through nervous system, and these messages getting actuated. That's how you have actuators. You have sensors and you have actuators. Sensors are what you embed into the system, and actuators are what gets the message out of the system. So the so when the message reaches the nervous system, a form of gesture actuates it, articulates it, and brings it outwards. It externalizes it, and that is why the role of the gesture is so important. And then it is a role of technology to find what is the point, the intuitive point where the user is able to uh, connect the particular contraption, make a connection between this particular sensory in use and the messages that are being, outputted. So I will come to, so some of the gestures here, while studying gestures, technologists have observed that there are four kinds of gestures. There are inborn actions which you kind of inherit. There are discovered actions which you slowly figure out through experiences. Like you go to school, you go to college, so there are different kinds of gestures you figure out. Then as you grow older, you also emulate gestures of those who you like, you're fond of, your companions, your teachers, your role models. So those are absorbed actions. And then finally you have trained actions, where in through our social upbringing, we are taught certain rituals, to do pranam, to greet people in certain ways. So those are all trained actions. So the computer environment is now being taught to take these actions through different kinds of gestures, and be able to read what is the right gesture and accordingly build the information inside it. So we have the we'll just skip this chart because this was in the context of, when I said that we have a deep connection with sensory. Uh, let's just go past. So this is the structure of the way technology connects with the human body. So you have the sensories that have two-way flow. The sensories carry messages into medias. Medias give a feedback to sensory, so the sensory corrects and goes back and throws back more messages. It does it through gestures because it automatically generates gestures. So if you're angry, then it'll be one kind of gesture. If you're happy, it'll be another kind of gesture. And then when the information, when the supporting technology interacts with the particular media, and through that back and forth, the back and forth happens with the affordance that is built there. So I'll give you a simple example of affordance from the physical world. When you go to open the door, do you put your hand flat on the door, or do you always roll your palm because you expect to find a handle? That is your intuitive approach to a door, right? When you approach a baby, you will not do that. You will keep your palms open and you will hug the baby. That is your affordance. Now, if there is a particular media or a particular product that requires for the baby to be comforted, then it has to take affordance that where which imitates the human palm and embrace. Okay, if it is something that needs to be opened or pointed, for example, your buttons, because you need a button to click and get an information, it will not do for you to then go, feeling the whole keyboard. Then it has to be a pointed device. So the computer doesn't know these things, and there's a great deal of effort today to try and bring in as many gestures as possible. Until we had touch screens, we had only this finger, the button gesture. We didn't have anything else, but now we have a lot of different kinds of gestures, but that is nothing compared to what the human system is capable of generating for better and better communication. Now let me show you this chart where you can see the connection between sensories, sensory as extension of media and media as extension of technology. So these are everyday medias. Uh, as you can see, the sensory let's take the radio. The sensory we use, everybody knows, is audio. It's the ear, and you take the facility of hearing, and you also have, I forgot to write here that you also have sound, which is also part of hearing. But I need to write sound there because you also speak. So the radio is an extension of your ear and your mouth. I'm sorry, I was thinking of the telephone. So the radio is an extension of your ear, and the technology it uses is transistor technology. We then come to photography, which uses your eyes. It uses your eyes alone, your vision alone. Now the affordance of photography is actually quite uh, good, because when you stand in front of a photograph, you know that the only way you can actually see a photograph is to stand in front of it. You won't try to go behind it. You will not try to bend your head. Nothing. It is a very straightforward relationship you have with seeing photography. It's also one of those simpler technologies. We come to the next one, uh, which is television. Television. Okay, the next one is cinema, which is audio and visual, and of course the technologies, moving images using reel. So the next one is television, which uses audio and visual and gesture. Why gesture? Because unlike in a movie theater, when you're sitting at home and watching television, let's say you're watching a football match, are you just going to be sitting prim and proper? No, you'll be, flailing your hands, and then you'll be shouting with joy. Or if you're disappointed, then you'll go slump on your sofa, and so on. So gesture is a very important part of television viewing, and of course, it uses tube technology. We then come to these have fairly rich affordances, because when it comes to cinema or photography or television, you know exactly how to watch this. There's a screen in front of you, you watch television, and of course, you can also slump on your sofa and watch, and you can still watch the same image without any problem. You and likewise you have the telephone, which is one of the best affordance, which has one of the richest affordances, because there is a natural extension of your mouth and your ear, and the two cups over there suggest the way it should be held. It's a very sturdy instrument, and when Henry Dreyfus designed it 100 years ago, nobody's been able to actually 50 years ago, nobody's been able to actually better that design. and of course, it uses switching systems. Earlier, it was analog switching system. Now it's digital switching system. And then we come to the mobile phone. The mobile phone has one of the poorest affordances. I've already mentioned why, and it of course uses chip technology. Do not confuse the different facilitation of mobile phone with the with the lack of affordance that it has, because when you pick up a mobile phone, uh, first of all, you pick up with the palm of your hands, and the mobile phone should have had a curvature in the center, like the way the lota has a curvature in the center, so you can hold it nicely in the crook of your fingers. It doesn't have that. It's the material wise also, it's slippery, it can fall. It's very uniform shape, and it neither mimics your ear, the shape of your ear, or the neck where you have your ear, nor does it mimic your mouth. uh, uh, and of course, the mobile phone also is something where you see, so it doesn't have any property. You see, today you have responsive design, programming, so that all the information that goes, horizontal on desktop automatically becomes portrait, from landscape to portrait format. But while you're seeing, it's not like television or cinema, which is very easy viewing. While you're watching, it'll skip, the image will go, then you'll have to bring it back. So all in all, mobile phone is very has very poor affordance, has very poor interfacing with the user, and has very poor, in that sense, media experience. Now, remember, I said that new technologies, emerging technologies, are not the kind of technologies that you want in social spaces. Usually, the technologies that will sit comfortably in social spaces are conventional technologies, which have been tried and tested, which are inexpensive, which have sturdy material built into it, and so on. And of course, most of the population in India uses feature phones, and feature phones do not have the some of the the visual media and all of that I just spoke about. So obviously, uh, the mobile phone, the smart mobile phone, is not obviously in the hands of most people in the country. It's obviously not planted in the middle of social design space. But let's move on to the to bring in a couple of important points of view about technology that McLuhan was able to forefront, that nobody else was able to see it that way. He said two things. First, he said media is the message. Now, media is the crucible through which the message comes out. The word media itself comes from medium, and the plural of medium is media, but today media itself has become a noun. So, media is not supposed to be the message. Media is supposed to be the conveyor of message, but and it's supposed to be incidental to the message. But McLuhan, as a keen observer of culture around him, and the way that media interacted with culture and technologies interacted with culture, was able to understand that depending on what media you're using, you will be positioned in the minds of people. One of the interesting examples for this would be the 2014 general elections, when all these very smart people, the English speaking smart people, you thought that they would actually be using the latest technologies, but it was actually not them. It's the other party that eventually won. Uh, they had their election strategy through holograms, and they had very, very advanced social media usage, through which they were able to reach a great many more people also outside the country. That's how the diaspora became so interested in the whole election canvassing, etc. Whereas and these were not very English speaking people at all. Whereas the English speaking people who've gone to universities abroad, who have smartphones, who have all that, were actually not, uh, for some reason, able to leverage all these very smart media. So, what is the message that went out? the the fact that they were not using the the most outstanding media that helps you reach the most number of people today, which is social media. The fact they were not using, uh, said to people that they're not connected to, either connected to people or connected to technologies. So I'm just using that as an example. But this media is the message can also create a social divide, because it has already created a social divide between the young and the old, where the young make fun of the old because they're not often able to use social media very effectively. And so it is now called ageism, where you assume that the elderly person doesn't know how to use. He probably knows, but you have already assumed that the person doesn't know, and that is not a great social design space to be in. But in many other, so in ways that is good, and in ways that is not so good, media is the message, is a very important point of view. Because you find somebody with the latest Apple iPhone, and you find somebody with some other phone. In your eyes, they are already different, socially stratified. And this is something that McLuhan had come to understand. When you're doing your own designing, you need to actually factor into this, and factor into uh, the reality that these technologies, which have direct connection with our body because they're embodied. I'm carrying my mobile phone. I already know about chip because I have to take out the chip, change the chip, keep this chip carefully. So we are already actually intricately connected with these technologies, which have become, in some sense, part of our bodies. Uh, it means that technologies are now identified with humans in certain ways. Now, let's look at how technology, how media becomes the message. Use of let's look at use of street theater. Now, are we ever going to give up street theater? No, because street theater is a very effective way for me to protest, as well as show my humanity. When the Nirbhaya event happened, there were so many street theaters. It was not the cell phone that went around telling you things. It was street theater which said, please don't do things like this. Graffiti, one of the oldest technologies, one of the oldest inventions, and graffiti is growing bigger and bigger by the day. If you go to Berlin, if you go to Calcutta, if you go to Mexico, Mexico City, all of these cities are rife with graffiti. Paris, outskirts of Paris, because graffiti, first of all, is in some sense authored and personal. I draw on the wall and I do it in my style. And then, of course, it is a statement of rebellion. If I don't have a statement of rebellion, there is no point in going and doing graffiti. Street art, public art always has a message to go with it. Otherwise, it's kind of a waste. If you take the electronic bulletin board cannot do any of these things. It is about power. It is about showing power. Who is the CEO of the company? Vis-a-vis who is not the CEO of the company. And there is a hierarchy through which the bulletin board works. And you have to be very careful how you post your messages, who you post your messages to. So you take the uh, telephone. The telephone is one of the most democratic. I'm talking about the landline telephone is one of the most democratic, uh, you know, uh, messages through which you can pass on an information. In even now, when there is death in the family, you pick up the telephone and you start making calls one after the other. There'll be a little phone book in front of you. The phone book will tell you there'll be little annotations on the phone book. So and so kaka doesn't hear well. So and so mama stays abroad. So this is actually a overseas number. So you can see that whole social space that had got created around the telephone has got completely destroyed with the arrival of the cell phone. If you take the letter, the handwritten letter, it's one of the nicest, messages you can give. Since no one writes a handwritten letter anymore, if someone does write a handwritten letter and send you the media, when and you say media is the message, your day is made because you've received the letter. The same words written on email would have not been the same thing. So, for example, your cousin is getting married, and you've made a wedding card, and you go from door to door giving that card. It's a beautiful card. It has Ganpati, it has Haldi, it has Kumkum, it has beautiful patterns, gold, etc. Then it gets converted into an e-card. Is there? That's the message. Did I care to take a card, actual card, and visit your place and invite you, or did I just send it by email? So, at the social level, at the cultural level, uh, you need to actually your choice and discrimination of choice of technology, and how you discriminate across the various choices uh, will come from your understanding of which media gives out what message. And email, of course, compared to the letter, is a very, very impersonal medium. The other point of view, and a very, very important point of view, that McLuhan was able to bring to understand technology was to call medias and technologies where he, because medias are extensions of technology, so for him, the two were the same, to call them, to categorize them as hot or cool. And he, by hot or cool, he means actually temperature hot and temperature cool, as in uh, 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 जैसे कि कहते कि बहुत गरम गरम खबर है, so he had meant it in that sense. So when you say garam khabar, it's almost like garam samosa, or when you say cool, then cool is cool, but it also means cool guy nowadays, because it's very good to be cool and calm and composed, because if you're temperature wise cool, then you're also a cool person. So he came up with this notion of hot and cool, where he uh, described, first of all, according to McLuhan, uh, you could not actually be residing inside hot medias all the time, because it would raise the temperature of the body itself, because psychologically you would be too uptight, you would be too hyper all the time, and therefore the cool medias actually help you cool down. So what are the hot and cool medias? Because the hot medias are very dense with information, so they up your blood pressure, all of that, and so you end up actually becoming a hyper, sometimes agitated, all of that. Let's look at hot and cool media. Uh, a hot media is actually made up of a single sensory. A cool media has multiple sensory. Now, if I had an interactive media in a talk with you, then I would ask you, what would be one single. Manish, is this interactive? Is the session interactive? Yeah. Are you participants? Are you able to hear me? Because then I could ask you a couple of trick questions.
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you.
You can? Great. All right. So now we're going to do a little 5 minute, you know, uh, 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 puzzle solving. So one single sensory versus multiple sensory. Uh, can you think of a media which is, can you think of one under one single and one under multiple sensory? Anyone from participants? I've already given you examples. Think of the examples I've given you. Or to get you started, let me give you an example. One single sensory use of media is the radio, because you're only using your ear, your hearing capacity, your hearing sensory. Multiple sensory would be so many. I just spoke about it.
Yeah, television for that matter.
Exact. Absolutely. Television. Can you think of something else? One more.
Cinema.
Cinema, yes, cinema, because it has two. It has more than one. Cinema, right? Uh,
Typewriter,
beg your pardon. Which one?
typewriter,
Typewriter. That's a very interesting example. Typewriter. What would be the sensories? Yeah, there is hearing, right? There is touch, and there is vision, right? So the typewriter would be definitely a cool media. Actually, it was one of McLuhan's own choice to cite the typewriter as a cool media. Let me give you a few more properties of hot and cool media, and you start thinking up examples. Okay. So first, a hot media will be made of one single sensory. Cool media will be made up of multiple sensory. Secondly, hot media has is very high on information that is well filled with data. So if you listen to the radio, it'll go Akashvani, Aaj ka khabar, and it'll go prattling away all the news, one after the other. आज ये हुई यहाँ पे, कल वो होने वाले हैं, ये inauguration, that, then some disaster somewhere, some storm somewhere, so many Jawans have died, or there was this Smarak Samiti for Abdul Kalam so and so anniversary. All this news that's coming to you is all coming to you ready made there, and you're consuming. There's nothing you can do about it. You're listening. You have to believe all that news because you're consuming that news. So there's a lot of news. It's very well structured. It is never casual. It is never formal. Radio news is some of the most well-known presenters have actually been on radio. They're very formal. Uh, I'm not talking about Radio Michi, I'm talking about the conventional radio. They're very formal, and they have all these codified behavior, and it is high on information, very well filled with data. Cool media will be low on information, and it will leave a lot of information gaps. So Radio Michi could be an example, actually, of low on information, media. Now, something that is high on information is called high definition. Something that is low on information is called low definition, which were words used by McLuhan in the 60s. We are using those words slightly differently now, to show resolution of image. But McLuhan's words, the way he used high definition and low definition, are immensely rich and immensely interpretive. Uh, uh, let, let me give you one more property of hot media and cool media. Hot media also has okay. Let me ask you for some examples now, for some more examples. Give me some examples of cool media. You can take from the examples I've already given, but locate them under hot or cool. Okay, let me prompt you. Where will letter writing, hand, handwritten letter, what media would that be?
hot media,
Oh, a handwritten letter would be,
hot
did you,
media,
did you say hot media? Okay. What would an email be? What would be an email? Somebody tell me what an email would be, and then I will, rework this whole thing for you.
hot media also.
Okay, now I'm very interested in the in the answers that you just gave me. So normally what happens is email is a modern technology. Letter writing is as old as humankind, since the time that we learned to write. So you think that a modern technology is hot, and a distant technology or a conventional technology is not hot. So uh, McLuhan's hot and cool media is actually the exact opposite. Hot media is boring because hot media here has low audience participation. It has low audience participation because it is not, the audience is not interested. The audience it is a one-way, it is a one-way interaction, and it has to, in radio, for example, there's nothing you can do. You can just listen, you put it on and you put it off. You can neither ask the guy to, to speak in a certain accent or do this or do that. It's nothing. So, uh, email is actually a hot media, because when you write a mail, you are actually filling, giving all the information there nicely. Whatever has to be written has been written, because it's on the computer and you've done it through the keyboard, and you've probably done spell check. Everything is in proper order, and in fact, there was a news on yesterday's newspaper, I think, which said that lawyers are now worried that their clients shoot off these emails and put themselves into a fix. So they say that once you put something on email, it's written in stone. Whereas if you say something orally, like politicians do, they'll say something orally and they'll go back on it. Say, no, 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 what I meant was, or you heard me wrong. So email is full of information, and there's nothing you can do about the email once it is gone. Whereas even when you write the email, you're quite formal. Whereas the handwritten letter, let's say you've written a love letter to your fiance, okay? And the love letter has been posted because it is, after all, a handwritten letter. Uh, now, let's say it's a letter from a boy to a girl, and the girl receives a letter and then she starts crying, and some of the tear will fall on some of the words, and then some word will get smudged, and then she is trying to guess what that word is. So there's a high level of participation between the user and between the reader and the consumer of the media and the letter. So let's move on to some of the some of the next properties. Uh, there is very low scope for audience participation in contributing or mediating or altering information in hot media. Therefore, the audience's interest goes. I mean, it becomes it is a one-way relationship. Whereas in cool media, uh, there is high scope for audience involvement, because the audience can fill in data, can complete the information, can interpret, so there is a high level of partnership in cool media, whereas there's a very low level of partnership in low audience partnership in hot media. And as a result, the hot media uh, becomes an exclusionary medium, whereas the cool media becomes an inclusionary medium. So, if you can get your head around this, think about it, reflect, and be able to use it in your designing, then you will actually score a point, because it's a it's a very novel, very interesting way of featuring, and also it's very logical. So there are some interesting examples that was given by McLuhan himself. He said, radio is hot, television is cool. Now, television is even more cool, because when you sit on the sofa or your couch and you're watching television, and then, when the news guy comes in, you're making all kinds of noise, like, no, I don't agree with you, I don't like your face, I don't like your accent. So then you'll switch channels and then you go somewhere else and you like so and so, and then you will lie down, and then you will probably ignore the anchor. So there's a lot of interactivity that's going on, a play going on between the medium and the consumer. Typography is a hot media, because it's letter set, it's hot press earlier, it is now digital letter set. Calligraphy is cool media, because through calligraphy you can actually, you're putting in information in calligraphy too, but you're actually doing it in a way where there's a lot of participation. When a calligrapher does calligraphy, there are people around the calligrapher, and then the calligrapher also takes information from the environment, from the kind of ambience, and does things accordingly. So and then I said email versus handwritten. School textbook versus Wikipedia. That would be a nice example of hot media versus cool media. Now you think that Wikipedia is actually the hot media and school textbook is cool media, but it's not. According to McLuhan, Wikipedia is the ultimate of course, he was no longer there to see Wikipedia, but I will talk about some of the visionaries tomorrow who were able to predict something like Wikipedia way back in the mid 40s. Wikipedia is where you're able to contribute, you're able to interpret the information, you're able to reinterpret, you have full on participation, full on involvement, and it is one of the most inclusionary uh, uh, social media platforms. And it obviously does a great deal to forward to expand the role of social design. A telegraph Morse code that would be sent during wartime, or we used to have the telegram that would come with 3 words or 4 words, is actually a cool media because they're interpreting it in so many ways, whereas printed announcements would be hot media. So, and notice that all of these medias have their are very, very connected to their supporting technologies. You're constantly looking at it in terms of, okay, now email is this technology, and radio is that technology. So you're constantly also thinking about the technology, and yet we've already connected all of these medias with our body, with our sensories, and therefore McLuhan was right in perceiving that technologies are actually connected to our bodies, in almost directly connected to our bodies. So I would like to now move on to a very the second point about information, and that this would be my last point to make before I show you something. Uh, I'd said there are two attributes of information. One is atoms and bits, which I've already talked about now. The other attribute about information is that information and computing, basically computing is based on mathematics. Technology is based on mathematics, not just computing. All technologies are actually based on mathematics, down to the earliest technology, which was oral technology, written technology. Writing is technology, language is technology, because basically technology uses mathematics because mathematics is a discipline that expresses itself through symbols. And it started off, actually, it expresses itself through abstraction. That abstraction had started off in the form of pictograms at the beginning of human history, and for a very, very long time, it remained that way. So through that, language was codified, through that, counting systems were codified. Most of the time, the abstraction would have an embodiment. So you had, cowrie shells with which you did counting. You had the abacus for children. Cowrie shells were for traders. Then you had these next bones of, on the bone they would do these marks, and with those they would remember counting. But as life got more complex, I suppose, and and information got more aggregated, you needed more complex systems, which doesn't necessarily mean you had to become completely, abstract. So and represent your entire worldview through numerals and symbols. Now, in mathematics, you have symbols which are, for example, sine, cos, theta, beta, alpha, sigma, etc. Right? So uh, when you look at those, when you look, just go back to when you look at these symbols, you can't make out what they are. Somebody has to tell you what they are. Can you intuitively make out what alpha is if you've not been taught? You can't. Whereas if you looked at the symbols, the pictogram based symbols earlier on, the abstractions that were done earlier on, you could actually, till about 14th, 15th century, we had a fair amount of abstraction through pictograms, through which we could actually understand counting quite effectively. And it was, of course, Darwin's, uh, Darwin's definition of technology itself was a fusion of arts and sciences. And trust me, when C.V. Raman graduated from Calcutta University Presidency College, he, as well as Professor Amartya Sen, one had studied economics, one had studied physics and chemistry, uh, but they were both BA and MA because for a very, very long time, until recently, uh, maths, languages, all of these disciplines, physics, chemistry, that had abstraction in them, were all part of the sciences, and sciences were backed by philosophy because you asked essential questions when you studied sciences. So, sciences were combined with humanities to form a whole. And for a long time, Oxford and Cambridge universities continued with that tradition. But with the onset of the Industrial Revolution, when things became, dissociated and became, I've explained to you how the machine and humans became completely dissociated. So things that the machine could read, the humans could not read anymore. And so that particular dissociation and the kind of and the way that mathematics started being studied became a very elitist domain among scientists, amongst students who would do well in maths, and it created a culture of a divisive culture. This is, and I raised this question right in the beginning that if technology's basis is mathematics, and if a society is fearful of mathematics, then how will that technology become part of social design? How can it become part of, equitable social spaces? It's a question that we need to ask. This was a question that was addressed by a fantastic computer scientist who's now in his late 80s, uh, the computer scientist whose name is Seymour Papert from MIT. Seymour Papert, although a brilliant scientist and was brilliant at maths, recalled his own way of learning maths when he was a kid, where he realized that the learning of maths becomes easier when you related to physical objects in your environment. So when he was very young, he was very fascinated with gears. And so he actually looked at gears and he did most of his mathematical calculations through gears. How much did this gear turn? How many gears do we have here? And so through his own way, he tried to make his maths learning easier because he says that if I did not have those gears, I would have been dreadful of mathematics. And so, of course, he became a computer scientist and he was at MIT. Then, he is actually he's actually a genius because somewhere in the 80s, when the computer became from mainframe to personal, when computing became personal computing, Papert started figuring out how can he make maths learning easier for children and fun for children and really small children. And on top of that, the challenge that Papert took up was how can I make maths learning easy for children from very poor backgrounds, like our jhopar or municipal schools. So these we call them municipal schools here in Boston, in the USA. They're called inner city schools. Inner city is where most of the poor, the economically poor live. Usually they will be black. Usually they'll be, now Hispanic in southern parts of USA. They'll be Hispanic. They'll be immigrants. And they'll be much neglected communities. They'll be poor at maths, they'll be poor at science. They will not, most of them will not even be able to go to schools. So Papert decided that I'm going to test out maths learning with children, number one, and with very, very economically disadvantaged children, number two. And what he did was to float a project called the Hannigan Project, which he took straight into this inner city school in Boston and he tried out with these kids. What did he try out is what we are going to look at. So Papert tried to figure out what is it that makes maths dreadful for children and grown-ups. The first thing that he said was that maths has become a highly dissociative subject where it has got dissociated from our culture. And by that he meant that culture is where you have, artifacts. Culture is where you have, different kinds of products. You have playthings. You have cooking utensils. You live in an environment where there's a culture of products. There's a culture of music. There's a culture of so many different things, right? Now, maths, when you talk of maths, you do not associate it with anything from your everyday living. Do you? You don't. And you dread the idea of maths because the only place where maths is done is in school and in maths class. And then usually the teacher will come and teach maths in a very cognitive way, and you just wait for the maths class to get over. Usually you'll get low marks in math and you'll be scared to show it to your parents. So maths is one story of dread for most of the world's population. That for sure is reality, and it is not their fault because mathematics was made very cognitive starting with the Industrial Revolution when the machine age set in. So all of the artistic attributes that were brought to abstraction of maths, that is figures, images, etc., were all lost. They're all gone. And maths became this whole dreadful numerals that got explained through E equal to MC squared. God knows what E is, what MC is. How do you know? Maths and physics are the same actually, because physics depends on numerals too to understand abstraction. Once you understand that, it's great. But the point is to cross that hurdle. Papert tried to understand, Papert's effort was to see how the basis of technology can be democratized so that technology sits in social spaces, in equitable spaces, to be used by all, by children, by elderly, by rich, by poor. So he tried to understand what are the properties of maths that basically counting, the whole abstraction of counting, what are those properties that used to be there starting with cognitive revolution. Now, this is why I keep talking about cognitive revolution and the time scale coming down, because those like Papert, those like physicist Feynman, who was part of the Manhattan Project that made the bomb, the Hiroshima bomb, and these were people who learned later that they were being asked to, the research they were doing was actually uh, intended to make a bomb to be dropped in Japan. And many of them then walked out. Niels Bohr, Feynman, etc., walked out. But the reason I bring in Feynman is because Feynman took an interest in art. And he often wondered if physics could be taught through art. So many of these, there's a lot of reading written by, books written by Nobel laureates who are constantly actually going back into cognitive revolution onwards to understand how we develop abstraction through those years and how we actually in one go through the machine age abandon all that. And that may not actually be the story of large parts of India, large parts of culturally mediated, societies. So there is a big hope that maths learning done in the way that Papert has proposed can actually be brought back to these people, something that Dr. Vivek Montero is also trying to do. So some of the attributes that Papert tried to understand. First thing is that you need something that you connect with everyday life, something that you identify with, and something you love. And he chose the turtle to be something which has a physical property. You can see the turtle, you can even touch the turtle. It's an animal that is loved by young and old the world over. So he decided to take the turtle. You can take something else, but let's look at what Papert developed, because that can become the prototype for all of you to develop something else, an inspiration to do that. Uh, he then decided that he will take the platform of geometry, not algebra and not arithmetic, because algebra and arithmetic are full of numerals. Whereas what does geometry have? Geometry has shapes, forms, It has all these circles, squares, rectangles. You have double rectangles, you have, hexagons, you have so many interesting shapes. And when you look at these shapes, you can actually identify these shapes with so many things in everyday life: flowers, stars, the fish when you cut is like triangle. Like when you draw a fish, we draw it like two triangles, with tapered edges. The birds, wings of birds, and so on. So he decided that he will take the turtle and he will actually use geometry as a method to teach maths. He will not use algebra, and he will not use arithmetic, which actually basically started with Euclid's, uh, who used, I'll come to that. So he decided not to take Euclid's arithmetic or Euclid's algebra, and Descartes is also actually practiced algebra. So he decided he will not take any of this. He will take geometry, and he will use the turtle as a platform. So the second thing about, so the turtle, he's taken something which has friendly identification for children and adults. It's important that there's friendly identification for both children and adults, because the adult has to teach the child, right? Uh, Also, the turtle is a loved thing, so you would like to take the turtle. The turtle has physical property. The turtle has a certain size. The turtle has a certain shape. It's so easy to actually imagine a turtle, because even if the turtle is not in your house or not in an aquarium close by, you just feel you've seen a turtle. So that the turtle is round. It's like it has a hump back. It's like a dome. It has four little feet that come out sometimes. It has a little neck which has a certain shape, and so on. So essentially, the turtle has physical properties, and that is very important. Okay. The third thing, very, very important, is that the turtle represents a position. So the turtle, here is the turtle. Okay. The turtle is in the middle of my table, or the turtle is in near my kitchen, right? The turtle is there, or the turtle is in the aquarium on the floor. You know that the turtle is occupying a position. It represents a position. When you take the point, you can't make out. The point is there. What is the point? The point that Euclid used, the geometry that we do in school, it starts with the point. Here is a point. You do this, you draw a line here, you draw a line there. You say, why should I draw a line in these directions? Shut the door. So the point, the turtle represents a position, uh, and the turtle does not, it is more than just a point. It is a whole physical embodiment. Then the third point is that the turtle is dynamic. It represents movement. You can't imagine a point moving around on its own, right? But the turtle is dynamic, it represents movement, and you can imagine that the turtle has moved from one point to another. You can almost feel the space, the amount of space it has covered while moving, etc. And because the turtle moves, you can think of doing so many things with the turtle because it's dynamic. Then the turtle represents a sense of direction. The turtle has a head. It's like the human being. The turtle has a head. You seat the turtle there on the floor. The head is in that direction. The leg is at the back. So what will be the dominant direction? The dominant direction is the head of the turtle, because the turtle moves ahead, looking in that particular direction. So you say, here is the turtle, and the turtle is looking north. Now, north, south, east, west are things children understand very well. The turtle is, so you say the turtle is facing the sun, so you also then invoke other things. So you say, you can now bring in other objects. So the turtle is actually facing a boat, or the turtle is facing the sun, or the turtle is facing another animal, or the turtle is looking at a baby. So the turtle has something before it. The turtle has interactivity. So you already see 2 points. So the sun and the turtle have become 2 points. Whereas in Euclidean geometry or maths, you say take 2 points, and you say, why should I take 2 points? What do the 2 points tell me? It tells me nothing. Okay, you're just asking me to mug up. Whereas over here, I have a turtle. The turtle is looking at the sun. I get that. There are two objects. I can build a story around it. And then after that, what happens? The turtle, because it is dynamic, it can move. So you say the turtle has moved from point A to point B. The turtle has moved in a certain direction, east west, and the turtle has covered this much distance. So that means you can actually now so easily measure distance. You have figured the direction, you figured the distance, you have figured the coordinates because the turtle is here and the sun is there, and you figured that if the turtle moves at this pace, it can only cover this much distance. You know, the workflow exercises they used to give us in class, and we used to go home and have nightmares, right? So these are the points that this was simple, right? That Papert actually figured. And lastly, he said the turtle is also a live entity. So the turtle is like a person. It's a personification. You can say, my little turtle, my sweetheart, you're my dream. You can call the turtle anything. You can say, today the turtle is the turtle has behaved like the devil. So you can personify the title in so many ways. Can you do that to the point? You can't. So the turtle, if the turtle has behaved well, then the turtle is this, or most of the time the turtle will be a sweetheart. And that's a much easier way to actually deal with trying to cover a certain area, to measure the area, to understand the coordinates in the area, to carry out different commands. The next step that Papper did was to, so this he called the turtle geometry. Okay, the next thing he did was that he needed to actually create commands. Now, there are three very important points between Euclid's point and Papert's turtle. I just want to quickly summarize. First is that Euclid's point takes point as an entity, and which is stripped of all properties. It has no volume, it has no depth, it has nothing. So you can't really relate to it, okay? And Papert's basic primitive entity is the turtle. It has physical property, volume, depth, shape, size, color, everything. The second point here is that Euclid's point is static. Papert's turtle is dynamic. The third point is that uh, Euclid's point does not have any spatial context. The point is just sitting there. Then you say, let's create spatial context. So you will talk about the triangle, then you'll give all kinds of coordinates and 45 degrees angle, and you'll create space through all that, right? So 45 degrees will create one kind of space, 20 degrees will create another kind of space. And just looking at all that space and like, what is the connection with everyday life? But you make the turtle move from one place to another, and you can actually measure the angle, measure direction, measure distance, etc. So that, and the fourth point was that the turtle is easy to command, in the sense that since you now are familiar with the turtle, this is the way it moves. You're not going to make the turtle move like a rabbit. You're going to make the turtle move like a turtle. And the reason why Papert actually chose turtle was because it moves slowly, because the pen on the computer also moves slowly. So the turtle was basically a personification of the pen, and personification of all the inherent motherboard commands that the motherboard is capable of taking. And the turtle becomes, like, in some sense, the mouse or the pen moving over the motherboard, taking commands and carrying out these commands. So Papert says that, you say command. You say so now this is turtle geometry. Now for command, he's come to turtle talk. So the command in this is called turtle talk. Even the terms are so cute. So here you say, in computer program, you use capital letters, right? So he'll say forward, and the turtle, uh, children who are playing with the turtle know that now the forward means the turtle has to move forward. Now, how much forward at what speed? So you say forward 1, or forward 100. Sometimes it will be 1, sometimes it will be 50, sometimes it will be 100. So, you can see here that depending on the figure that's been given, it will be less or it will be more. How simple, okay? So you've done the forward. Then you say, you give a command which says, side to side, and then it will move side to side. And then you give all these commands: forward 50, you say right 90, forward 50. And how easily the turtle has moved. And with the turtle, basically, the child has moved its pen through the turtle movements, and through by starting with forward 50, right 90, forward 50, etc. At the end, he's created a square. And the child, imagining the turtle to be moving like this, has figured that the turtle has taken this much time and this kind of directional movements and this much space it has covered to come back to its original destination, after which the outcome has been a square. So the turtle, I don't want images, we have some more images. So the turtle geometry and turtle talk became path breaking for its time and even now. And it took mathematics straight into the heart of the economically poor. And Papert said one thing very, very boldly for its time, because there was a lot of racism and there was a lot of this discrimination of black people at that time. And Papert said, my research with Hannigan Project, because the school was called Hannigan, my research with Hannigan Project tells me that these children are as bright as any of the children living there in Manhattan. And I will work with these children, much more than I will want to work with those children, because I have a bunch of children eager to learn. They're like sponge. There's nobody who's taught them, and their head is full of these ideas. And then he also realized through the Hannigan Project exercise that children could actually make their own programs. So that was called the logo. He called it the logo environment, which was actually a combination of logic, LO from logic, and Lego, because those are blocks. So the GO from Lego. So the logo platform is the computer platform where children use turtle, like turtle pen to calculate turtle geometry. So whenever they're calculating, they keep moving the pen with the commands that they give, which means certain directions will produce certain results. And at the end, most of the geometrical concepts have been understood by them. And then after that, what they've tried to do is they felt very excited. So they've actually started creating their own commands to find out what happens beyond the regular shapes of geometry. So Papert was able to establish that children uh, from these kind of from economically impoverished backgrounds could be very smart with computer, write their own programs. That was the first time in the world that children sat and wrote program, and that too children from, underserved communities. So the Harrigan project remains one of the finest projects in, I would say, in social design. I had started my last lecture saying that technology's basis is mathematics, and people are scared of technology, and let it be. Therefore, how do we ensure that technology finds equitable spaces amongst common people who are afraid of maths? Therefore, I thought I would show you turtle geometry as an example of how maths can be learnt in a very intuitive way, and through this kind of learning, you can actually bridge inequalities with such a difficult discipline, difficult so-called difficult subject. When learnt in this manner, lets people understand that there are no cultural or social divides. These are all man-made, and they can all be overcome as well. So I will end the lecture here. I had a very nice example to show, a project we've done with Microsoft, but I will not show that because I think that this tribute to Papert. And Papert, I've been working with Play and Learn for a very long time. We have a Play and Learn lab here at IDC for the last 25 years. And Papert also talks about, I would just like to briefly mention, Papert also talks the basis of turtle geometry, the basis of, the basis of the choice of turtle is the idea of what he calls a social construction of knowledge, which is something I've talked about in social design, the genesis of social design. The social construction of knowledge, which I haven't mentioned there because it goes beyond the scope. I don't get enough time to say these things, but I'll mention here that the social construction of knowledge also was enhanced by certain thinkers like the Russian educationist Vygotsky or Rabindranath Tagore or J. Krishnamurti or Maria Montessori, or Piaget. Papert was deeply inspired by Jean Piaget, who actually Vygotsky, Piaget, Rabindranath Tagore, they all believed in a certain kind of learning, which was learning that you learn from knowledge you construct on your own by absorbing that knowledge from your own environment. So you don't so the main thing is not books. In Shantiniketan, when Tagore was alive, then his son Abanindranath Tagore, and even afterwards, it was mandatory that people went out and went into the villages, the Santali villages there, went into the gardens, the trees, nature, the river, the Kopai River there, Sriniketan. So you went and did crafts there, you used your hands, you tried to understand, you tried to understand proportion, all that by actually doing these things. So Maria Montessori also did the same thing. She espoused the idea that children left on their own will look at their environment and find ways to do things which end up actually constructing knowledge. So, for example, if you go into the garden and you find your child playing with mud and dirt and all that, and you just go and start scolding the child, uh, the before that, you will notice that the child has actually gathered leaves and twigs and all of which may look so dirty to you, but disheveled to you. But actually, the leaves and the twigs and all, he's put them and he's trying to make them into a rocket. Now, if I can understand this and engage the child to look at his environment and construct more and more knowledge out of the environment, then that knowledge actually becomes intuitive to his system, and of course, it becomes part of a deep part of social design. And there's a very big attempt today, like Baiju is trying to do that in some ways, very big attempt today to, to try and bring knowledge back, uh, 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 to be learned through, to be felt and learned through intuition. There's a live streaming media is an example of cool media. Absolutely. Excellent example. I wanted to write streaming there. I didn't write that because I wanted to have an interactive session. I thought I will ask you for more examples. Do you guys want to give me some more examples of cool media and hot media from recent times? There are wonderful examples. Tell me what Twitter is. Is it cool or is it hot? Twitter, what do you think that is?
I think it is a cool example of cool media because there is a lot of information. It is inclusive and it is inclusionary kind of a media.
Okay, now let's break that down. You said two things in the beginning. There's a lot of information and it is processed, right? And what is Twitter? 140 characters, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So
Correct.
it is already bound within a boundary, right? It's like the radio. Nothing you can do about it. You may want to say more, nothing. You have to do it within this 140. And then, of course, this is the way Twitter has become. Uh, you say something, and there is nothing you can do about it. So I say Donald Trump is an idiot who did blah, 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 blah. That's it. That's my opinion. It has to be respected. You cannot come and you cannot interpret it. It stays 140 characters there forever written in stone. So actually, if you take a blog versus Twitter, then I would think that the blog is cool medium and Twitter is hot medium. What do you think? I've been thinking about it. Because of the 140 characters, Twitter becomes non-interpretive and structured, whereas a blog is not that.
But here again, if you look at it, there are so many different kind of sensories which would be involved in interpretation of whatever has been tried to be conveyed in 140 characters. So I think, I mean, it is again a debatable kind of a matter.
It
But
is,
yeah,
it is.
you are
Yeah. No,
right.
I'm actually not entirely right, you know. I've had this dilemma because you see, when you look at Twitter, Shashi Tharoor, for example, he'll come up with all these bombastic words, English words, right? And everybody is making fun of those words. So what are you doing? You're taking Shashi Tharoor's words and you're twisting them and you're actually making mincemeat out of them. That's a lot of interpretation, isn't it? And Tharoor has now learned to take it in his chin. Now Tharoor knows he's overdone it. So he's trying to tone it down a bit. So because of your interpretation, Tharoor's English has taken like a, nobody's appreciating Tharoor's English anymore. Right? So there is a lot of interpretation that I am worried about the 140 characters. I'm also worried about Twitter being extremely opinionated, where I don't think anybody changes his or her opinion after saying something on Twitter. I've said this, that's the last word. So, does that then make it non interpretive? So, maybe we need to create a category in between. I wanted to mention here that Marshall McLuhan's work, it's like Seymour Pappert's work, it was so phenomenal, you know. He's the one who actually coined the word global village, by the way. Because he felt that media would become common to most population around the world, and that is exactly what has happened. He was saying this in the 60s and 50s. Um, so uh, I was on a different point actually. So I've just lost the thread. Yeah. So do you want to give me any more examples of hot and cool media?
Ma'am, it's not a example. I just had a question
Yes.
regarding McLuhan's model on which he has explained hot media versus cool media. So you gave us really great examples, of the mediums. So from a content perspective, can McLuhan's model be put in a context of the medium's perspective and differentiated between what is hot, what is cool from a content perspective? Or it will be like very very murky kind of a comparison to draw.
No, it won't be. Now you've reminded me what I was going to say. One of McLuhan's colleagues who had worked with him for 6 years, Robert Logan, what he did was it was like a tribute to McLuhan's work. But McLuhan had passed away, right? So Robert Logan decided in the 90s that he will write a book. This book was called Understanding Media. Robert Logan went ahead and wrote Understanding New Media. And what he did was he kept all the chapter arrangements the same as McLuhan, because it was this tribute to McLuhan, but he brought in the new medias. Okay, and uh, he has addressed exactly what you're trying to say, because today content is king, right? Technology is not king; it's actually content, and that is how. Some people say that when McLuhan says that media is an extension of technology, that means you're giving technology a lot of importance. Whereas today, when you look at medias, you're actually looking at content. I exactly get what you're trying to say. It will not be murky. I think it will be very facilitating when you create content for you to decide if you're creating content which has the properties of cool or hot media. That means you then figure out which kind of audience it will reach to. So, for example, if you're trying to reach out to children, you want your media to be very cool, very interpretive. Children want to, it's like storytelling. Like storytelling is a great cool media. I've been itching to say that and I forgot. Storytelling, and so much of our learning today everywhere. Journalists, CNN talks about storytelling, scientists talk about storytelling, everybody's talking about storytelling because storytelling has a lot of interpretive value. It has a narrative at the same time, it has a structure, but you can actually build different kinds of substructures into it. You can make it, you can keep it linear, you can make it non-linear. And if you were to decide who you're addressing your content at, they may not want it to be cool. They may want it to be non-interpretive and hot, some of them, no? Some of them want it to be very stratified, very to the point. So, for example, when you're doing an analysis of, let's say, um, the pandemic, you don't really, a straightforward analysis of whether this vaccine works or that vaccine works. Straightforward. What kind of content would you create? You would create a lot of hot media content there, right?
Yeah,
It would
because it
have
will be
to.
based by a lot of data, hard
Exactly.
data.
Exactly. And contained data, contained. You have to quote the data, you have to say this is complete data. You cannot be wishy-washy. So that means it's not like cool media is the only way to go. Hot media is for certain things, cool media is for certain things. And I said the same thing for the four information technologies. All information, all the inventions that each of the information revolutions have thrown up, all those inventions are here to stay. We are never going to stop speaking. We're never going to stop telling stories. We're never going to stop singing. So the first information revolution invention is getting stronger by the day. Then there is writing. Because people don't write anymore, those who write are held in high esteem. And remember that the Constitution of India was written by hand. Jawaharlal Nehru had commissioned somebody to do that. And that handwritten constitution is sitting in the National Library in Calcutta in its archives underground, properly conditioned, properly like treated, tropicalized, and all that, so that the document never goes bad. We were very lucky. It's like a locker. We were very lucky to have been invited to see all those documents, Tagore's documents, Vivekananda's documents. There are documents, Churchill's documents, manuscripts from Rig Veda time. So these have started becoming very precious, right? Uh, so I think one has to be nuanced, one has to understand who the user is, and one has to understand no matter who the user is, I will not become undemocratic. I will always try to create my facilitation within the area of social distance because that's what who you want to be, right? That's why we are all here trying to understand what social design is. So if anybody else wants to ask something or propose something or suggest or correct me, I would love to hear. Otherwise, I request Manish to take over.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. I'm listening continuous.
Yeah.
And it was really one of the amazing lecture as earlier was there. And thank you, Ankit and others for their question. One question received from the one of the participant. I'm just asking you, if possible, then ma'am, it's good to answer it. The live streaming media, Netflix is an example of cool media. Is it right?
Yes, I think it's right because Netflix. I've been thinking about it too. I think Netflix is cool media because you have in an enormous choice of content there. So you put on a program, you don't like it, even before you've seen it, it's out. And it's out forever. It's not even there in your list. You decide whether you want to give it a thumbs up, you want to give it a thumbs down, you want to keep it in your list, you want to go back to the list. You have a great possibility for, in some sense, the OTT platform that's emerging is very cool because it's also very relaxing because nobody's forcing you to see anything. You take your own computer, you sit and watch. You don't have to share the computer with anybody. Earlier on, you had a television set, and then your mother would want to watch something, and the father would want to watch football, and then the somebody would come and say, "No, I want to watch that soap opera," and then there'd be somewhat of a fight. And in middle class families, nobody thought of having more than one television. So in that sense, although television was, the reason why the television is considered cool medium is because it has multiple sensories at play, but also it has a lot of gestures behind the television or in front of the television. A lot of things are happening. The quarrels happening, chai pani happening. There's a lot of, you put on the television, just keep chatting sometimes. The television is still going on. You feel it's like a companion. So Netflix is actually, in that sense, also in the way that Netflix particularly, I'm not talking about Amazon Prime, particularly Netflix, in the way that it has been profligate, abundant in releasing content. No, it doesn't even let you think. It's like you can take what you want to, you can discard what you want to. You are the king of content, choosing content, you take what you want to. And I wanted to mention, Manish, it's there in my lecture, but I forgot to mention that in 2008, uh, and this is just a side information that I want to give, that the India Development Center for Microsoft in Hyderabad is actually a center where a lot of their main projects conceived by Bill Gates, because in those days he was an active chairman, and for a long time he remained, emeritus chairman, right? So projects that he thought of would be nice to do would actually be passed on to the head of the India Development Center. So the head of India Development Center at that time for Microsoft was Shini Kapulu, very, very bright person. And every time Steve Ballmer came down to India, Shini Kapulu and Steve Ballmer was the vice president working directly with Bill Gates, and all the projects that happened that came from Gates and Ballmer into India Development Center would be reported directly to Bill Gates. So we were very fortunate to have received commissioning for such a project from Shini Kapulu. He had come down and he said, "You know what?" And he's such a smart man, He said, "You know what? I'm talking about 2008. I'm talking about end of 2007, way back then." He said, "Look, Ajanta, we have this remote, and the remote has uh, uh, up, down, and sideways. That's it. It has just four commands." So he said that, can we build interactive television with just these four commands? Because if I can have a mouse which is this simple, then I can build, I can build content. I can build the platform. Microsoft can build the platform. Content can be hived out, which is what Microsoft does. And in terms of interactive device, we don't have to worry. We can just take the simplest remote control at home and turn that into interactive TV control. So he said that the design constraint that I'm giving you is that you cannot have more than four commands, up, down, sideways. And with that, we actually created scenarios. We created the entire, design for interactive platform and how it would actually interact. So it was ahead of its time. We used to report directly to Gates, so we were very, in that sense, fortunate to have had these communications. So Shini and Balmer would have discussions, and we would have discussions with them, and then those would be presented to Gates. And that project had gone off very well. Maybe in the week ahead, or maybe for the next cycle, Manish, we can share that project, the interactive project that Microsoft felt it was ahead of time that we had designed. That would be a great example of cool media, actually, and content creation on your own, and content creation collaborative.
Thank you. Thank you for the answer.
Ma'am, do you think theater is a cool media?
Please repeat.
Theater is a cool media.
What is cool media? Please say that again.
Twitter.
Twitter.
Theater,
Twitter.
theater. I am take.
Oh,
Taking.
Sorry,
okay.
sir.
Yes, yes, that,
Theater.
yeah, of course, of course. Theater, oh, theater. Theater is a cool media. Theater is the height of cool media. I want to give that as an example. In that sense, if you were to take cooking, then cooking would be the best cool media possible. Why? Because cooking is one media which involves all five sensories of the human. And with these multiple sensory, and it's highly interpretive in terms of information. You can, and it is also very democratic. Now, theater, it's a very good example to take. Theater is a cool media, and therefore, when I gave the example of theater, street art, as media is the message, and I said, what is the message you communicate when you do street art? Street artists, theater artists are really held in high esteem, because you look at a theater artist and you say, my God, I don't think I can do that. You will never pretend you can be a theater person, right? You just देख लेते हैं, ठीक है, enjoy कर लिया, वो भी ठीक है, पर मुझे करने मत बोलो. So theater is a capability. Theater is not, and those who do it just like that do it. So uh, uh, theater has a sight, it has sound, it has hearing, it has voice. Okay, it has all kinds of gestures, and it also has smell, because theater is usually held, jatra, yakshagana, usually held outdoors. Like it'll be just a rough platform, and then people sitting all around, so you smell. There's a lot of smell of nature around, people around. If there's cooking happening, like a festival cooking happening, then you'll smell that. So theater is one of the finest examples of cool media. It is also one of the finest examples, not only because it involves all of these sensories, but it is a very potent medium of communication. You can take theater to communicate science. You can take theater because KSSP in Kerala has tried to do that. There are other organizations around the world that have tried to do that. Through theater, you can communicate oppression. Through theater, you can communicate romance, love, emotion, uh, political statements. You can make political statements. You can make social statements. You can make personal statements. You can be erotic in a theater. I attended a theater when I was in the USA a long time ago, when I was a student, where the entire, and this was at a very famous place in Brown University. There were very famous theater discipline, and some of them are actually world famous artists. Hollywood stars. And I remember seeing one of them, and there were others too. And the entire theater was done without clothes on. And my mentor, Jim Barnhill, who was already in his late 60s at that time, he used to take me to different places to, sensitize me to American culture. And he said, Ajanta, I'm going to take you to this. He was part of the theater group. And, when you enter that space, you don't feel anything. There is no, the whole point of sexuality, it's like nude beaches. It is only when you look at nude as the other that you have these connotations. But everybody is nude, then nobody is nude, right? Nothing. It means like tribals are nothing. So these kind of spaces get evened out through theater. Theater is a great equalizer.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am, and thank you, participant, for the question.
Thank you,
Now,
for the questions. Yes, indeed. It was the best session I've had so far.
yeah, no problem, ma'am. Very, very good, very good. And a special thanks to Dr. Ajanta Sen, ma'am, from Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay, Mumbai, from Industrial Design Center, and Nanyang University at Singapore. On behalf of Department of Applied Art, Faculty of Visual Art, Banaras Hindu University, this course is running in association with Maryland Institute, College of Art, Baltimore, MICA, and Michigan State University, USA. Myself, Manish Arora, thanking to all of you for your valuable presence, patience, and listening and interactive the session. We will again meet you tomorrow at 12 noon with a different speaker, and tomorrow at 5 p.m. with ma'am again. Thank you, everyone.
Everybody, thank you. Bye.